I welcome everyone to the Peak Performance Summit, creating harmony between mind, body, and nutrition. I am Keith Lockwood, your host, and I'm here with the amazing Simon Borg-Olivier. Is it? He's an.
It's a
What was that?
bless you. It's a pleasure to be here with you again, Keith. It's really my thrill to be invited to come on your program. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, awesome. Well, absolutely. So Simon here, he's an Australian yoga teacher, physiotherapist, and a research scientist renowned for integrating traditional yoga practices with modern sciences. He has experience in posture, movement, breathing, and mental control. He founded the Yoga Synergy, one of Australia's oldest and most respected yoga schools. So here we are. Simon, do you have anything else to add with that?
No, no, no. It's nice to be called a yoga teacher, but I've studied so many times with different wonderful teachers from Japan and Tibet and India and South America and South Africa and the indigenous cultures of Australia. I'm
Yeah.
sometimes reluctant to call myself a yoga teacher because yoga, unfortunately, is a very mixed word in the modern world. Often it's associated with the aerobics of the 21st century. It's about stretching and tensing, and to me, it's nothing to do with that. To me,
Yeah.
there's a greater depth and a holistic nature to it, which I'm passionate to share.
And you definitely know it best. So, okay, so with like you said, your incredible background in yoga, physiotherapy, and movement science, can you share your journey and what led you to like integrate these disciplines?
A brief summary?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I was lucky to be introduced to an understanding of how to connect with your body from a very early age. My father was a free diver, and he taught me
Oh,
how to swim underwater, which meant for me from the very beginning, when I was 6 years old, the essence of how to do what I had to do to live, to satisfy my father's wishes, was to
mhm.
learn how to not breathe. And the funny thing is, in the modern world, many people teach you should breathe more, but that's
Yeah.
exactly the opposite of what I learned when I was growing up. That actually the essence of fitness is how to do more things while breathing less. And that
Hmm.
led me on a path. I had a wonderful teacher when I was 8 who taught me the internal abdominal movements called Yoga Kriya in India. He was a wonderful man called Basil Brown from South Africa. He was an Olympic athlete, and he'd somehow been taught these exercises either from the Kalahari Bushmen or the Zulu tribes he was associating with, or from Indian yoga teachers who'd come from India to live in South Africa. Not sure, but this was 1968. Then
Yeah.
in my time in the 1970s, I explored a lot of movements just myself underwater and in the forest, and did a lot of things they call now animal flow. And uh, and then in the 1970s, toward the end, I had a Tibetan Lama who taught me the philosophy of yoga. And all of this embarked me simultaneously to start learning at university to do biological sciences, and also studying Indian yoga through Japanese teachers and other teachers. Then I went to India. I've just come back from India, my 28th trip. And, on the
Oh,
way, in the last 20 years, I've had a lot of Chinese teachers as well. So I'm trying to integrate everything. My initial university foray was in biochemistry and biology, but then I did a postgraduate research in molecular biology and genetic engineering. And then about 25 years ago, I went back to university to become a physiotherapist. And somehow
okay.
I'm integrating all of this. What I'm trying to find, and the ultimate quest is to find a way of really giving something to people which is going to be the best thing physically, physiologically, mentally, socially, to bring wholeness, completeness, health, happiness, and longevity on all levels, not just fitness.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So, and with that, like you said, your perspective of what yoga is completely different than what like people talk about it is now. So over your time in the industry, how has your perspective shifted?
Yes, very interesting because up until I was about 20 years old, I didn't really have anything to do with the word yoga, but I was probably doing better yoga in my teens than actually when I started doing yoga. Because when I
Mhm.
started doing what I was told was yoga, it was much more about stretching and doing fancy postures.
Yeah.
And that was okay. And I had a foray into that for, a good 10, 15 years. I studied with BKS Iyengar and Patabi Joyce in India, and we learned, the modern versions of Ashtanga yoga, Iyengar yoga, which are very popular still today,
Yeah.
and the vinyasa flow that resulted from them. But then I thought that was something was missing in it, and I think the missing thing was that the traditional yoga was developed uh, for the traditional body, the type of person who squats to go to the toilet, walks everywhere, and then sits cross-legged for having a meal. Of
Yeah.
course, nowadays that doesn't happen. They used to carry things on their head. Nowadays, people carry things on one side, lopsided. They do everything asymmetrically.
Yeah.
Walking doesn't happen. Everything is sitting on chairs. And this messes up people's bodies. So if you give the normal modern person a traditional yoga practice, they often end up getting very bad damage to their joints, which may not manifest straight away, but often manifests in their 40s and 50s, if not immediately. And so this led me back to physiotherapy, and I became, fairly focused as a physiotherapist on musculoskeletal science. This is back in the 1990s. And for a while, it made me very reductionist. My perspective really narrowed to it's all about muscles and bones and strength and flexibility. Then about 25 years ago, I realized that this is not enough. Now I'm 65 years old. So around 40 years old, I realized I don't feel the same as when I was
Yeah.
25. When I was 25, I could do 100 backflips in a row and feel really dynamic. But
Hmm.
come 65, it's a different story. So about 25 years ago, I started to realize the importance of nourishing your internal organs, your physiology. So a lot of my practice in the last 25 years was geared more towards internal health. How can you use posture, movement, breathing, mental control, and other lifestyle factors like how you interact with others, how you think, and also what you eat to make it so that your internal organs stay healthy? So your nervous system is predominantly in that parasympathetic calm mode, which is the best place for healing. So you get better immune health, digestive health, reproductive health. And when you do this and you really work with it, and I've been really blessed to have such great teachers, both in the West and in the East, that now I have a really good set of recipes for simple accessing tools for health, happiness, and longevity. And so this is how my perspective changed. Initially physical, then much more physiological, and now, in the end, happiness, I believe,
Yeah.
is the most important thing. Having purpose in your life and being happy, that's something which I think is the most important goal. But the thing is, that will only happen if you've got some sort of internal guide for that. So what I try and do is I create a situation in my body where I have a pain-free, functional body, and I circulate what I call good energy and loving information inside my body, where the good energy is a healthy blood flow with a low heart rate, and the loving information is that dominance of your parasympathetic nervous system, that which, where you rest, rejuvenate, relax, and your body's reproduce cells. And so that then is a recipe for happiness and allowing you to have purpose in your life. That's how I shifted, I think.
Okay, awesome. And this is perfect transition into my next two questions. So I'll go with this one first. So you talk about like breath control and how it can enhance your energy and create relaxation. So can you explain how breath work affects the body and the mind?
Okay, I used the word breath work for a long time in my social media posts to say I'm teaching breath work, but I realized that many people actually misunderstand it. And when most people teach what they call breath work, it's usually hyperventilation, breathing more than normal,
Hmm.
which is not wrong to do, but if that's all you do, it actually causes a destabilization of your nervous system and reduces blood flow to your brain and to your cells. So the type of breath work that I do is often the opposite of what other people teach. I predominantly will teach how to breathe less. And when I say less, less volume of air per minute will go in and out of me. And
Hmm.
the benefits of this is that it builds up carbon dioxide. And when you build up carbon dioxide inside your body, whereas most people think carbon dioxide is our enemy and it's causing global warming, which really is a different story. But
Yeah.
carbon dioxide feeds the plants. And, if you read the old text and you study basic medical science, carbon dioxide is one of our most important neurotransmitters. And what it does in its presence, which comes by breathing less rather than more, is you increase blood flow to the brain. You calm the nervous system down. It causes the increased entry of oxygen to your cells, which means that when you burn or metabolize glucose, you get 19 times as much energy from the food that you eat. So carbon dioxide is our friend. It's what we build up when we breathe less. But when you do the opposite, breathe more, you get reduced blood flow to the brain, which means a dizziness, a queasiness, a lack of energy, lack of clarity. And you cause also a hypersensitization of your nervous system, which basically amounts to stress, emotional dysfunction, skin sensitivity, and problems like asthma and immune dysregulation. So it's about breathing less, but one caveat is that you also get a lot of benefits from using your muscles of breathing. So this is why many people say exercise is good for you. It's
Hmm.
because when you exercise, you actually use your chest muscles, you use your diaphragm. But the secret of real health is how can you use your muscles of breathing without breathing? And in India, that's called yoga kriya. So, for example, it looks like I'm breathing into my chest, breathing out, breathe in, breathe out, but I can do it without breathing. And actually do exactly the same with your muscles as you would to breathe in many different ways, but without breathing. And then you're exercising your muscles of breathing, which then connect with your internal organ systems. And also by exercising your muscles of breathing, you also manipulate your spine, your internal organs, you shift pressures and you move blood in a way that you can regulate heart rate variability. You can actually, change your heartbeat quite easily,
Hmm.
and it gives you control of your internal systems. It allows the conscious mind to access the unconscious, and on a deeper level, you can use this to reprogram uh, very old programs that all of us have been, put into when we're kids. Like
Yeah.
when you're 7 years old, and the teacher sees you chewing gum. If you keep chewing that gum, you're never going to amount to anything in your life. No one will love you. And you have this program that's imprinted in your life, like many of us have them. So how do you
Yeah.
get rid of these programs? You have to access your unconscious. And so a lot of my work is about rewriting the internal programs. But to do that, you have to access your unconscious. And that's part of what I'm doing.
Perfect. I love that. And it's just such a different way to break it down and explain it. And I'm sure a lot of people that will be listening to this have never heard it that way before. Um, so thank you for sharing that. So now, people listening to this, many people will probably be either struggling with some type of stiffness, pain, poor mobility. How can you approach how can your approach to movement help them like gain their flexibility back in their strength?
Okay. Some people have the aim to be contortionists, circus gymnasts, and things like this, elite
Yeah.
athletes. The thing is, if that's your aim, fine. And there are ways of working towards improving strength, flexibility, and fitness for those means. But those people are actually only a very small proportion of our society. 95% of people just want a pain free functional body.
Yeah.
So, if all you're looking for is a pain free functional body, then what most people care about is getting rid of uncomfortable parts of their body and just being able to achieve the things they need to do in everyday life. And for that, you don't need the extreme movements that many people in yoga classes do, in fitness classes do, and those who are training to be elite athletes, gymnasts, or circus contortionists.
Yeah.
So, the secret is to, if you've got a problem, say a physical problem, a pain in a joint, the muscles or the region which is painful often is compressed or over tense. So, a very simple recipe is if you've got one side of a joint in pain, then you need to relax and gently release that part. And the easiest way of doing that is by activating the opposite part. So, for example, if you've got pain in the back of your hips, then activate the front of your hips. If you've got pain on the inner thigh, then do something which causes your outer thigh to become active. Or if I can show you with my arm, if I have a pain on the outer shoulder, then by bringing my arm inwards like this, it tightens my inner armpit, which not always, but can sometimes just release the outer shoulder. Whereas if
Mhm.
you were to pull your arm into a stretch, the stretch that most people do elicits a stretch reflex, which means that the muscle you're trying to lengthen becomes tense at the same time. And a tense, lengthened muscle will still feel painful, but
Yeah.
a relaxed, lengthened muscle will release. So, the simplest thing to do if you've got a painful joint is to lengthen and relax it. And the best way of doing that is through active movements, as opposed to what many people do, which is passive stretching, where they fall into a position either with gravity or one limb pulling another or momentum. Learn to use your own muscles to move as far as your body wants to go, and then your own muscles will tell the other muscles to do what they need to do. This, of course, is just the first step. But when you work with active movements like this, then what happens is you also get strength on one side of your joint without consciously feeling tense because you're just doing your job. And you get relaxation and flexibility on the other side of the joint. And of course, you can do this on either side of the joint. And the combination of activating and contracting one side of a joint and relaxing and lengthening the other side of a joint means that the joint that you're working with acts like a pump. So one side pushes blood, one side pulls blood. And so instead of having to make your heart race to move blood, obviously blood circulation is good for you. This means that your body becomes one functional pumping device without your heart needing to work. And then what happens is you have increased blood circulation while being relaxed. You see, a lot of people think that if you've got a joint problem, it's just about mechanics. Like when you fix a car, you just bang it back into place or you change the part. But actually, most recovery situations involve not just mechanical changes, but also you've got to trigger the adequate responses of your
Mhm.
immune system, reproductive system, digestive system to actually heal. So, with healing, you can't just stretch. If you stretch, that's part of your flight or fight response. Often, the body loses its sense of freedom, you feel trapped. The next step after stretch is pain, the next step after pain is injury. And also, like I said, often most stretches trigger a stretch reflex, which is part of your flight or fight response. And so then by working the way I'm working, which is moving actively predominantly, this gives you not just musculoskeletal release of tension, but also it pumps blood while you feel relaxed, which means your internal organs are primed for healing. So that's the beginning of the work that I do. Then the next thing is I make all the movements that I do initiate from my core. So rather than what many people do, which is to lock your core, it's of course important to have a strong core, but
Mhm.
you've got to learn how to relax your core, breathe from your core, and move from your core. And when you initiate all movement, all action, all breath from the core of your body, which is, between your pubic bone and your navel from the front, between your tailbone and the top of your hips from the back, inside, this is the seat of your enteric nervous system, which is euphemistically called the gut brain. So everyone knows that you should trust your gut feelings, but of course the gut does have feelings. It's got a thinking capacity which is of an order of magnitude which is not quite the same as the thinking brain in the head, but the enteric nervous system is about as large a network of nerves wrapped around your intestines, which is as big as a cat's brain. And cats are smart. So when you
Yeah.
connect the thinking brain in your head through movement, breath, and conscious thought to the action brain or gut brain at your core, then you already start to access your unconscious mind, and that promotes healing. Yeah, that's a beginning of what I'm doing.
Yeah. Awesome. And that's so it's one of those things because even in like lifting and all that stuff, like you want your core engaged. And I feel like I know at a younger age, I didn't focus on engaging my core on certain movements and things like that, which created back pain for me because my muscles were overworking trying to stabilize my core. So it created like an ongoing back pain for me.
Yes.
And so I also want to put something out there for like the busy professionals and parents. So who feel stressed and overwhelmed. So what are the simple movements and breathing exercises that someone can do from like their desk while they're working or something like that?
Okay, there's a few things. It's when we have the aim to have health, happiness, and longevity as a result of our conscious movement patterns, our conscious activities with posture, movement, breathing, mental control, which could be your going for a walk every day, it could be your yoga class, it could be a fitness class, then the first thing to do is have that as your aim. Don't have as your aim some future goal. You know,
Mhm.
some people go, I'm doing fitness because I want to get fit. I'm doing these exercises because I want to get flexible. That
Yeah.
is looking toward the destination, whereas everyone's heard the expression, it's more about the journey than about the destination.
Hmm.
So if you make it so whatever you're doing consciously feels good at the time, that's a big step. Because many people go, no pain, no gain, you know, survival of the fittest. If you're good, you're going to go to heaven. If you're bad, you're going to go to hell. These are outdated paradigms that really don't nourish your body. So have as the aim to make, say, good energy and loving information circulate through your body. Like I said, by making healthy blood flow through a pain-free, functional body while being relaxed. So while you're practicing, don't do stuff that hurts. That's the first step. And then if you make that your aim to make pain-free, functional body where blood circulates and you're feeling relaxed in your practice, stop blocking that aim. So what blocks healthy blood flow and what stops your nervous system being relaxed is things like overstretching, overtensing, overbreathing, overthinking, and overeating. These five things, if you can just reduce them, you're better off. Now, overeating is a separate story, but
Yeah.
if you work with what I'm saying, you'll find that, for example, by breathing less in your everyday life, as opposed to consciously breathing more, you'll find your appetite suppresses almost immediately. That's a separate story we can talk about another time. But often people, for example, overstretch. Now, the worst type of overstretching is sitting on a chair. Because when you're sitting on a chair, like most people do 5 to 15 hours a day, the back of your hips are way more lengthened than the front of your hips. So this
Hmm.
is not an intense stretch, but it's prolonged. So
Yeah.
number one thing is for everyday life, get off your chair. Even if it just means once an hour, get up and go for a walk for 2 or 3 minutes. Even if it just means if you're on your iPhone and you want to type to someone or you want to talk to someone, we've got software now that allows transcription. So,
Mhm.
talk to your phone while going for a walk to write your emails. That's simple.
Yeah.
Don't just sit hunched over a desk doing this when you could be walking. So,
Yeah.
stretch less and don't make stretching just the prime focus of your practice either. Make it part of your practice, but maybe not all of it. The second thing is tense less. Now, when I say tense less, it can also be don't chronically just exercise to feel tense, doing weightlifting. But the number one thing that most people need to pay attention with, and this is many women more than men, but all people, is people unnecessarily tense their abdomen and their pelvic floor. There's no need. You know, the abdomen, many people talk about, I've got to have a six pack, and you see these people walking around from the beach with these pronounced six packs. And you're going, why do you need a six pack to walk?
Yeah.
Any muscle that you can't relax is as chronically dysfunctional as a muscle you can't tense. And some people, like I work in my life a lot with paraplegics, quadriplegics, and it's always a surprise when you tell someone that someone who's paralyzed doesn't have flaccid muscles. They can often be over tense. So a
Hmm.
muscle that doesn't relax is as useless as a muscle that doesn't tense. So the number one thing I think for people on a musculoskeletal level is stop tensing unnecessarily your abdomen and your pelvic floor. Like pelvic floor, for example, women especially get told, tighten your pelvic floor, otherwise you'll have incontinence or maybe dysregulation after pregnancy. And many men think, oh, it's all about tightening the pelvic floor so I don't have erectile dysfunction or don't have incontinence or
Yeah.
don't have premature ejaculation. Pelvic floor exercises are useful, but don't walk around with your pelvic floor tight all day. You know, like almost anyone listening to this now could ask themselves, is my pelvic floor too tight? Let's see. Can I relax my pelvic floor? Everyone try. Relax your pelvic floor. And if you can relax your pelvic floor right now, more than it was 2 seconds ago, and nothing bad happens, like you don't urinate, you don't defecate, nothing leaks, then
Yeah.
probably your pelvic floor was too tight. And so there are names for people with too tight pelvic floors, and they're not nice names. So
Yeah.
the things I teach often to many people, especially women, but also men, is let go of unnecessary tension in your body, especially pelvic floor, abdomen, because this is the place where you're supposed to breathe from. And if you restrict those parts, you lock your spine, you cause dysregulation of your nervous system, you can't breathe properly, you usually overbreathe, and you feel anxious and tense. They're the two first steps. And the third one, of course, is don't breathe so much. Rather than think breathe less, just stop trying to think breathe more. You know, people go, I'm exercising, therefore I should breathe more. No, no, I'm exercising, therefore I should relax and enjoy the fact that I'm off my desk and just
Yeah.
breathe naturally. That's simple steps, you know. There's much more, of course.
There we go. So sitting at your desk, make sure you get up every hour and go for a 2 to 3 minute walk. As that's the
Yeah,
basic starter pack that
yeah,
you can do. And it's simple. You don't need to purchase anything. You don't need to do anything. You just get up and walk for 2 to 3 minutes. So
100%.
you also have developed a unique approach. It's called the 5 dimensional flow.
Yes, five-dimensional flow.
Can
Yes.
you explain what that is and how it differs from traditional yoga?
Okay. Um, the funny thing is, five-dimensional flow for me is a word that it's a phrase that I coined because all traditional movement begins from your core. So
Mhm.
the most common expressions of this concept lie in uh, Chinese martial arts, where they talk about all movement should start from your dantian, which is basically the core. And
Mhm.
your dantian in things like Taekwondo, which is a more of a Korean thing, is they call it the dandon. And then in Japan, they talk about moving from your hara, which is the same region. In in modern medical science like physiotherapy, they all talk about engaging the lower abdomen. And the lower abdomen, as opposed to the upper abdomen, is related to your core. Now, in Indian yoga, the word is there. It's called the kanda, but it's not a word you see in modern yoga.
Yeah.
But basically, all traditional movement from China, Tibet, India, even the indigenous cultures of Australia, where I live, there's some cultures where they have the word nadu kuru, which means everything should start moving from your core. And so, what I did was I said, what's the common origin of all movement? And that is in all traditional cultures. And also, the understanding of modern medical science is that you should connect with your gut feelings, your enteric nervous system. You should move from, you should engage your lower abdomen before, doing straining exercises. And this means that the common origin is about your core. Now, your core is basically that region centered around the lower abdomen and lower back, but it's very difficult for most people to access that region. So, what I teach them in the beginning is, can you move the trunk? Your trunk is the large version of your core. And
Yeah.
so, very simplistically, I get people to move their trunk in 5 different ways. One of them is bending forward and backward, which is spinal flexion and extension. Another one is bending sideways, lateral flexion. Another one is twisting, going, turning left and turning right. Another one is lengthening and compressing your trunk. And a fifth one is expanding and contracting your trunk. So these 5 ways of moving your trunk are also the 5 ways of moving your core. But in the beginning, you can't teach people to connect with their core. All I can say to people at the start is stop trying to tense your core, stop trying to overbreathe, relax and breathe naturally, and now move your trunk in 5 ways. And once they've learned to move the trunk in 5 ways, it releases lower back pain, it starts to move the internal organs, and provided they're doing it simply in the beginning, it's perfectly
Yeah.
safe. I wouldn't start telling people to do this while they're trying to lift weights or do dangerous
Yeah.
activities. In the
Yeah.
beginning, you pick simple, safe activities and you move your trunk in 5 different ways, hence 5 dimensions or qualities of movement. And this is the common origin of all traditional movement, and also the understanding we have from movement-based physiotherapy and internal physiology, hence five-dimensional flow.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah. And it's so you move the trunk, and then that allows you to move into moving just the core.
Correct. Yes, correct. You see, one thing, Keith, is that almost everyone in the fitness world has heard what I believe Australian physiotherapists in about 1989 at Queensland University, which is about 2 hours drive north of me, they published papers which said that people with back pain tend to be a little bit different from people without back pain. They said a person with back pain has a slightly different a slightly different order in their movement activities to a person
Mhm.
without back pain. And it didn't have to do with strength. It was that a person without back pain would move and they'd have three activities. First activity is, I want to pick up heavy object. And it's a
Yeah.
thought. Second activity is they engage their lower abdomen, a muscular activity. Third activity is they reach with their arm and pick up the heavy object, something like this. But the person who maybe has the same strength or less strength or more strength has the same activities in a different order. They will go, thought, I want to pick up heavy object. Then their arm will reach out to grab the object. Then their core engages. But this change in firing order means that they're more likely to have back pain. So the publications of 1989 from Queensland University suggested that we should teach people to engage their core before they move. And this went all around the world. Hence the thoughts of draw your navel to the spine, this teaching of engage your lower abdomen. But the same physiotherapists in Australia, about the year 2000, they sort of realized ongoingly that it didn't work for everyone. Why? Because when they studied people with real-time ultrasound, they found that many people weren't just engaging the lower abdomen, they're engaging their whole abdomen.
Yeah.
And so there are different muscles in the abdomen, including your transverse abdominis, which is a horizontal circular muscle, which has lower and upper versions, your oblique muscles, internal, external oblique, which go from top to bottom, your rectus abdominis and your spinal muscles, which go vertically. And so what you need is a particular combination of those muscles, but really just lower abdomen. The only one that satisfies that is the understanding of how to control your transverse abdominis, which means you should be able to roll your abdomen vertically, making the lower go in softly while the upper has remained out softly. And this is something that really, if you ask the average person to do, only 1 in 20 people can do. When you ask a child to do it, even babies can do it. But as adults, most people have lost this. So
Hmm.
engaging the core is what people teach. But even, physiotherapists now realize you can't give that instruction and expect people to do it without causing dysfunction, locking of the spine, tension, and inhibition of your internal organ systems and stress.
That's huge. That's huge because I deal with lower back pain, and that's from prior military. I was the second person. I thought and then reached, then engaged. So
Yes,
I
yes,
I did most of the lifting and carrying things just off of pure strength with
yes,
no thought of like, okay, I'm bending over to pick this up and brace my core first and then, lift. I'm just going up. That's how heavy is that? Okay, I got it. And then just lift it up and then it creates, long-term back pain. So that's why
yes,
I'm going into the breath work and trying to engage my core and things and like those things again, starting from the scratch, like you said, as the baby would, because it's for us, we go through so many things and we forget the simple stuff that we're naturally given and able to do.
yes. Babies have their act together. They walk around with a relaxed belly. Kids do it. It's only when they get a little bit older, especially girls, they go to their
Yeah.
first ballet class and the teacher tells them to suck in their tummy and tighten their pelvic floor. And that really messes up your emotions, meshes up
Hmm.
your internal cycles. So that's fantastic. Can I also comment that, when you're doing everyday life, it's often different to doing, training. So my suggestion is that in the world of modern training where you're doing strength training, a lot of people talk about a 9 repetition maximum for picking up weights. That's often a
Yeah.
popular way. And when you're doing that, you're picking up a weight till failure. And when you pick up a weight till failure, by the last one, which might be your 9th repetition, you actually feel like a failure. And
Yeah.
subconsciously, that's not a good thing. So, they often say a 1 repetition maximum is better because then you fail quicker and your body's more likely to respond with strengthening. But this is part of a stress response. It feels like, your body subconsciously thinks that you're in a battle, that you're undergoing the need for flight or fight. And so when you're in the state of flight or fight, which is often the feeling you get when you're a failure and you're struggling and you feel tense, that often doesn't give a good subconscious response. And then
Yeah.
subconsciously, you turn on your flight or fight response, which turns off your reproductive, digestive, and immune functions. So, my suggestion is unless you specifically are training for doing something, like an Olympic weightlifting record or something like that, then generally the activities that we do should have a much higher repetition maximum. Maybe do something for 200 times before you fail. And then you're
Hmm.
doing something which is sustainable, engaging, possibly calming, meditative. Then you're doing practices which are more meditative. Now, I'm not saying anything new here, because even the trainer of an Olympic runner will say, if you're running and your aim is to get to the next Olympics, they nowadays say, today we're going to run for 100 minutes, but I only want you to run hard for 10 minutes. For 90
Yeah.
minutes, I want you to run in a way where you can talk normally. And just, of course, other people will think you're running fast, but for you, it should be
Yeah.
easy. And so I think this is an approach we need to take with weight training, an approach we need to take with every sort of exercise. Give yourself a training period, and it might be, say, 100 minutes of doing something, but only for 90 minutes. Train in a way where it feels calming, effortless, but it still is moving blood. You're still using your muscles, but not
Yeah.
feeling stressed. And then maybe for 10% of the time maximum, go hard. That gives a better response. And of course, if I'm talking about my traditional teachings from my teachers, who some of them are in their hundreds, then they will say only 1 minute in every 100. 10 minutes in every 100 of working hard,
Yeah.
that will get you to the next Olympics. But if you want to live to 120, 1 minute every 100. The rest of it meditative, calming, in the zone, in the flow state.
Yeah. I love that expression. And so this next one brings me, you mentioned it in the beginning about people working out and doing things so they can feel pain free. So you emphasize movement should be fluid and pain free. So
Yeah.
why is this so important, and what is the biggest mistakes people make, which we kind of covered just now when exercising?
Okay. So a lot of people exercise with the idea it's just about their physical strength and flexibility, a little bit of get the heart rate up. Heart rate is about physiology, but most people are physically based. And of course, we're not just physical bodies. We do have physiological components such as blood flow, nervous system, internal organ function. That's often ignored. And it's a big mistake because people die rarely of having their arm broken. They die of internal organ functions a lot more commonly. Some people die in an accident, but most people die of old age, which is
Yeah.
a dysregulation of your internal organs. So obviously, it's important to take care of your internal physiology. And so and then the other one, of course, is your mental state. Someone with no thinking clearly, or someone who has no purpose in their life, is not going to have a happy, long life. So you need to pay attention to all three: physical, physiological, and mental in your exercise. Because in your exercise or your workout or whatever activity you're doing, which is embodying some sort of connection, you need to predominantly be in a relaxed state. Of course, it's good to move, it's good to do things which activate muscles. One of my favorite axioms as a physiotherapist is exercise is optional, but movement is essential. So when we're practicing, make predominantly something which is pain free. Because when you have pain, your body thinks something's wrong and you get apprehensive. And then you enter a state of flight or fight. Subconsciously, the mind starts to feel stress, and
Hmm.
stress is a manifestation of your flight or fight response. And when you're in a state of dominant sympathetic nervous system overload, which AKA we call the stress response or the flight or fight response, And it can be a physical stress, mental stress, physiological stress. Your internal organs shut down. You won't be able to heal. Your immune system stops working. You won't be able to reproduce cells. Your reproductive system stops working, which means not only do you have dysfunctional sexual activity and fertility, but also your skin cells won't regenerate. Suddenly, you might be a 35-year-old person who
Yeah.
looks strong. You've got the six pack, and from some distance, it looks great. But when you come close, you see a 35-year-old skin might be full of skin that looks like leather. Their skin's not regenerating. My
Yeah.
oldest teachers, you'd come up to them, they might have white hair or something, but their skin is like silk. So
Yeah.
having a regenerative system working, you need to have your parasympathetic nervous system dominant. That state we call the state of rest, rejuvenation, relaxation, regeneration, relaxation. And that
Yeah.
will not happen if you're experiencing pain. So make your practice feel enjoyable. Connect with your body. Go for a walk, dance, swim, but don't make it so that the whole time you're suffering. And some people like suffering. But why do they like suffering? Well, one reason, and this is to the addicts out there, which,
Yeah.
maybe you were like this and I was like this. What often happens is when you breathe a lot, you reduce blood flow to the brain. And that can a little bit make you feel good because some people overthink. And when you breathe a lot, that can also hypersensitize the nervous system. Like I was saying, the effects
Hmm.
of reducing carbon dioxide. This affects a little bit like marijuana because suddenly you're out of your head and into your body. And some people love
Yeah.
that. And then if you add to that, if you stretch and you tense and you go work out, then your body starts to secrete the hormones of the sympathetic nervous system, which include adrenaline, cortisol, and endorphins, which are a little bit like the body's natural cocaine, caffeine, and heroin.
Yeah.
And so the reason why many people wake up after a workout, which they really enjoyed the day before, and then next day they wake up and they're sore.
Sore.
They go, why am I sore today? Because when you were doing the workout, you worked so hard that you're secreting endorphins, which are like painkillers. And in fact, when people are working out, they often say, I feel amazing. I'm on a pranic high, a yoga high, a
Yeah.
runner's high. And you go, no,
Yep.
no, maybe you're just stoned on the body's own marijuana, cocaine, caffeine, heroin at the same time, which are great drugs, but they don't actually promote long-term health. And you won't realize on these drugs that although it feels fun, you may be damaging your joints, which may eventually heal, but if your nervous system is dysregulated and you're not doing any healing, then you'll find yourself ending up with joint problems, physiological problems in your 40s, 50s, 60s, and then eventually you die.
Oh, that's very interesting. So I love that concept because I, I've never had a runner's high. I don't like running. So, but I know people that they finish a run and they're like, yeah, like I feel great. And I'm like, how? Like my body's drained, I'm tired, you know.
Yes,
So
yes,
but I do feel that way sometimes when I'm working out. And I notice I feel that
mm,
way when I'm working when I go into my workout in a different mindset. So if I'm, like you said, stressed or dealing with some anxiety or something like that, I go in, I'm not here, so I'm lifting and I'm like, this feels great. But then the next morning I wake up and I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have did all that last night. I shouldn't have did all
yes,
that yesterday. And
yes,
then now I have 2 or 3 days where everything is sore. I can't,
yes,
pick up a water bottle because I'm like,
yes,
ah. So
yes,
that is a different thought process of going into the gym and realizing like, okay, so don't maybe not go so heavy, go lighter reps and
yeah,
actually, do that 10 reps, that 10 minutes of actual, heavy, and then go back to those lighter reps where you're in that meditative state.
yes, yes. I think one expression which I really like is workouts are okay, but with a workout, you usually end up with less energy, more need for food, more need for sleep, often pain the next day or immediately afterwards. But what I look for more is a work in. And a work in is to me what yoga really was meant to be. And the word yoga is an Indian word, but there are yogas all around the world. They have different names.
Yeah.
And so a work in is where at the end of the practice, you have more energy, less need for food, less need for sleep, and you have more sense of connection within yourself. I said it by, but I say share good energy and loving information inside yourself in a pain-free functional body, where the good energy is healthy blood flow. Healthy blood flow makes you feel energized, but with a calm nervous system, because it's not, you don't need your heart to beat to move blood. Blood flows very effectively
Yeah.
by 11 other methods and by stopping, tensing too much. So when you have healthy blood flow while feeling relaxed, that's an invitation for happiness. And so that is more like a work in rather than a work out. And then you have pain free. You're not, doing things where you're getting, painkillers going through your body, so you work too hard. You're also working for the now rather than the future.
Hmm.
And in the end, you do feel better, but you don't necessarily suffer afterwards. Work in rather than work out.
I love that. Yes, work in, don't work out. I'm gonna be saying that in my post now.
Yes, but we have to put the caveat because some people go, but how am I going to get stronger? If your aim is specifically to increase strength within 2 weeks, you can work out, but at least surround your workout, which might be a 10-minute intense workout, with 50 minutes on either side of doing more meditative movement practices, which could be the lightest repetition of weights. It could be going for a walk. It could be doing something, anything. Like I like doing internal martial arts,
Hmm.
but I'm 65 years old. So very rarely will I move super fast.
Yeah.
Often I'm doing the same movements very, very slowly. It looks a bit like Qigong or Tai Chi, where you're using your muscles, but it doesn't look stressful. And then your muscles will still work, they still pump blood, but then only for 1 to 10% of the time go hard.
Yeah.
Not that
I
it's
love
wrong to
that.
do it. You can still do it, but just
Yeah,
less.
because we people tend to look at it as if I'm not working out as hard, then my workout is not as successful. But
Exactly.
each time you move, you're still moving your muscles. You're
Yes,
still breaking down those fibers and things like that.
yes,
So
yes.
all the results are still the same. It's just mentally we're like, if I don't feel it, then I didn't work out.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. That's what we've been conditioned to believe. The funny thing is, you and I, Keith, uh, we're movement junkies all our life. And so invariably, there's only about 1 in every 20 people who are like us, who actually worked with the paradigm at some stage in our life of no pain, no gain. Most
Mhm.
people just don't buy it. They go, oh,
Yeah.
exercise, fuck that, that's horrible. So actually, we're preaching, to you and me, we're like the converted already. But most people, and most people means 95% of people, simply don't exercise at all.
Mhm.
So to convince them that they need to do something, get off your chair, you're not going to convince them with painful things. But I give the most simple exercises to people. So I say just 6 places in your body connect with. One is lengthen your fingers, learn to move them. That resets your nervous system and pumps blood. Connect with your shoulders. Relax them and gently roll them. That makes such a big difference. Lengthen your neck, gently move it. Relax your pelvic floor and move your pelvis. Even if it's sitting on a chair, just move your pelvis. Then, fifth one, lengthen your lower back, which is the back entrance of the core, and move your belly in and out, round and round if you can, or breathe naturally. And then the sixth one is connect with your facial muscles. So learn to move your jaw, your lips, face, and eyes, because these are called the bridges between conscious and unconscious. These are the places in your body, 6 groups, where your nervous system can control them consciously, but they're also controlled unconsciously. Like
Yeah.
breathing, for example, everyone says breathing is the link between conscious and unconscious. It's not your breath. It's your diaphragm. Your diaphragm you can choose to control when I say breathe into the belly, or when you're asleep in your deepest, most regenerative cycle, the diaphragm works by itself. So it's not like your biceps, which you have to go turn on biceps and then let
Yeah.
go. It doesn't work. Your breathing muscles work by themselves or with your conscious control. That makes them a bridge between conscious and unconscious. And then also things like your muscles of blinking, your jaw, your lips, your eyes. Tense people, they have a tense jaw, tense lips, wide open eyes. Relaxed people, they move their lips, they move their jaw, they move their eyes. So by connecting with these places, including fingers, shoulders, pelvic floor, abdomen, you actually reset your nervous system. It helps you pump blood. It helps you connect. And they're the simplest things that everyone can do on a chair. Move your fingers, move your shoulders, move your neck, relax your pelvic floor. These are good things. Not everyone are exercise junkies like we have been in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So, and then with that, so in your experience, do you feel that there's a connection between mental health and physical movement?
100%. Yeah, I mean, we all know this, no? So if you are feeling inside your body lack of connection, lack of blood flow, for example, if you feel your heart racing, if you feel pain, if you feel that your breath is panting, especially chest breathing without connection to your abdomen, your body is saying flight or fight. And not only then are you destabilizing and repressing the functions of your immune, digestive, and reproductive health and locking your spine and reducing your energy levels, your mental subconscious mind is saying the emotions of the flight or fight response, which are fear, anger, aggression, lack of safety, lack of trust within yourself, in your environment. Because in the end, your perception of the environment is much more significant to your body than your actual environment. Two people can be in the same room. One feels relaxed, one feels threatened. But the threat is coming from their perception, which is manifested by what they're doing inside themselves. So definitely your physiological state and your physical state will pronouncedly affect how you think and feel and how you then act with others around you. Your relationships, your purpose in life, your job will be significantly affected if your internal levels are not adequately set.
Awesome. So we got two more questions for you.
Anytime.
What's a common myth about yoga or movement that you wish people would stop believing?
Okay, the biggest one for me is no pain, no gain. The next biggest ones I think are that you should breathe more and get your heart rate up. No, what we want is to have more energy and more energy going through the body, basically. You don't
Mhm.
necessarily want heart rate increasing or breathing more, but you do want to pump blood. And then the other one is, we've got to get strong and flexible. You've got to stretch and tense your muscles. Actually, what we really want is we need to get flexible and get strong. We want those things. But
Yeah.
you can get flexible without stretching. You can get strong without strong tensing muscles. So these are the myths that people have and, that I'd like to be able to dissipate. And there is a way out, but you have to let go of some of the paradigms.
Yeah. And then last but not least, finally, where can people learn more about your work, connect with you after this summit and watching this interview?
Oh, bless you. You can go to my website. It's called simonborg-olivier.com. That's the easiest way of finding it. You could also look at the same site by going to five-dimensionalflow.com, all as one word, either with a number five or the letters five. But you can write to me as well, simon@simonborg-olivier.com. You could find the same address on Instagram, Simon Borg-Olivier on Instagram, and write to me. Or you can, download my free booklet and some of my free videos on my site. But I'm happy to address questions. If people hear this video and they want to talk to me, write to me and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And that's fun,
Awesome.
I've got lots to share. I've got lots of online trainings. I have also a lot of trainings around the world. And I'd love to meet people who are listening to this right now. That'd be lovely.
Yes, definitely. Well, that is a wrap for the Peak Performance Summit interview with Simon Borg-Olivier. And again, thank you for tuning in. I know the time difference is at what time is it where you are right now?
It's not too bad. It's 11 o'clock in the morning, but I had
Okay,
to get up
so
a little bit early because it
so
was a, a
so not too bad.
preparation.
It's in the evening time here. So, but thank you for taking time out of your day and jumping on this and sharing this super valuable information. And I'm looking forward to working with you in the future.
I'm looking forward to meeting you in person one day. It's really a
Yeah,
pleasure to talk to you
yeah.
again.
All right. Well, everyone that's tuning in, thank you. And again, I will be sharing his website and everything that he just mentioned in the emails and things like that. So look for that in the emails, and please reach out to Simon if you have any questions or you want to go deeper on anything that he spoke about on this interview. And I hope you guys have a great day.